We got all the cards revealed for the new DAIGO set, so let's start digging into what Sanctuary Guard Dragon will bring to Vanguard this time. Stand up! Vanguard! Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another Cardfight update, and today is once again Tuesday, which means we have another live stream with a couple of big reveals, and this time they revealed all the new cards for the Sanctuary Guard Dragon, including their new skills, which gives us a good idea of what Royal Paladin will do with this new special trial deck set. But on top of that, we also got two new Bermuda Triangle reveals earlier this week and this weekend, and they paint a very interesting picture for probably budget players, and maybe even something special within the set that has yet to be revealed. But without further ado, let's jump straight into these new cards for Royal Paladin from the Sanctuary Guard Dragon special set, and let's see what DAIGO will bring to Vanguard this time. And we begin with their new starter, which is starting legend Ambrosius. This is just a generic starter, so we can just move on. It's just the artwork, so what would you expect? That they will give DAIGO special treatment? Yeah, and they probably will, and they did, because DAIGO will get a new Blitz Order. Yes, a new Blitz Order specifically for this set, because they got Legendary Fighter DAIGO as a Blitz Order. And what does it do? It's a quick shield. I was heavily joking. I mean, it isn't actually a quick shield because the name is Legendary Fighter DAIGO, but its skill is the same as a quick shield, and even stats on the card. You may use this card as a quick shield ticket. So, yeah. Now, with that said, let's dive into the actual new cards with actual skills, so we have an understanding of what Sanctuary Guard Dragon is actually going to do. Their grade 1 within this archetype is Authoritative Knight Ballizal. And its ability is Auto Vanguard Circle. When placed, look at the 7 cards from the top of your deck, reveal to one Sanctuary Guard Dragon or Knight of Conquest Wigstan from among them, and put them into your hand and shuffle your deck. Very generic, we've seen this time and time again. It just ups the consistency for the engine, and it seems that this special set revolves around this grade 1, that specific grade 2, and the Sanctuary Guard Dragon. It makes sense that it searches out those specific cards. So let's see what his second ability is, which is its main use, as that's Auto Vanguard Circle. When your Vanguard with Sanctuary Guard in its card name attacks, that unit gets power plus 10k until the end of that battle. If you have no face-up cards in your damage zone, counter charge 1. This ability may only be used by a card with the same card name once a turn. So basically, whenever your Vanguard that is Sanctuary Guard Dragon, or just Sanctuary Guard, but so far standard we only have Sanctuary Guard Dragon, it gains an additional 10k power for free, so it becomes a 23k Vanguard attack. And you could potentially get a free counter charge, which is nice, as thanks to this grade 1, you can keep generating counter charge turn after turn after turn. And as you're going to see with Sanctuary Guard Dragon, that's pretty good, because that means they cannot be effectively damaged tonight, unlike most other clans. Now, if we look at the new grade 2, which is of course Knight of Conquest Wigstan, we see the following abilities. His first effect is Continuous on Vanguard Circle. During your turn, if you have a Vanguard with Sanctuary Guard in its card name, this unit gets power plus 5k for each of your back row grade 1 rearguard. So we see that grade 1 interaction with Sanctuary Guard again. On first glance, this looks pretty good, because it means that this can become a 25k beater on its own when we sell Sanctuary Guard, and with an 8k booster behind it, that's a 33k column. But this skill is mainly here to not make it a weak attacker once we go into Sanctuary Guard, and it will make more sense once we analyze Sanctuary Guard himself. But this skill is basically to make him actually an effective attacker, as you're not going to boost him in the grade 3 turn. Now, his second ability, which helps pretty good in the overall engine, but also for early rush, is Auto Vanguard Rearguard Circle. When placed, cost counter plus 1, look at the 7 cards from the top of your deck, call to one grade 1 card from among them to the Rearguard Circle, and shuffle your deck. When you write this finger you called on grade 2, you can basically superior call grade 1, because it's very likely there's one in top 7. Call to the Rearguard Circle behind him, and you have an 18k column, so you can actually do very effective early rushes, and you can potentially even write him on grade 2, and call the grade 1 to the side column if you went first, because your opponent is 8k, so you can attack with an 8k, and potentially him as a 10, or maybe a booster behind him as an 18k. So it gives you early rush, but it also helps you to consistently fill the board with grade 1s, which is very much needed for his first passive ability, but also with Sanctuary Guard Dragon, as we're going to look at Sanctuary Guard Dragon right now. As here we have Sanctuary Guard Dragon himself, and this grade 3 boss unit has the ability Continues a Vanguard Circle. If your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, and you have a grade 1 unit, this unit's original critical becomes 2. So once again, we see a Royal Paladin boss unit that basically tells us don't play with Force 2, play with Force 1. But his main ability is Auto and Vanguard Circle once per turn. At the end of the battle, it attacked, while not boosted, cost Counterblast 1, and rest free of your back row grade 1 rearguards and discard a card from your hand. Stand this unit, and all of your front row units get power plus 10 until the end of turn. So, this card is a restander that doesn't lose drive checks, meaning it will swing twice with a twin drive. And its second attack will gain an additional 10k power, so it becomes a 23k attack. The first is 13, the second is 23. And the reason that's those numbers is that you cannot boost, as you need to have your entire back row filled with grade 1s, and all those grade 1s need to be standing the moment you resolve its effect, so you rest them. Which also results that your side columns won't really get effective numbers, as you cannot boost your rearguards as well. This is where we get in the situation with the grade 2 that I said earlier, that its continuous effect is needed to make it an actual beater. Now luckily, Sanctuary Guard Dragon does compensate this a little bit by giving the entire front row an extra 10k power, meaning any grade 2 could potentially hit for 20k, so could hit anything unless they get a defensive trigger, but luckily our support grade 2 can even hit high enough because it can become a 35k attacker. Now of course, these numbers that I just said, 13 and 23 as its attacks, could be higher because you have the force marker. And you're probably going to stack the force marker on your Vanguard circle, because that means the Vanguard will attack for 23 and then 33, which is a lot more threatening, especially if you went second, meaning both attacks will come with a critical. Now because we are relying on a back row filled with grade 1s, we probably will have access to the grade 1 of this engine, which suddenly becomes a lot more effective with Sanctuary Guard Dragon, because that grade 1 allows us to give the Vanguard an additional 10k power the moment his attack, meaning both his attack will be an extra 10k power. The first attack thanks to the grade 1, the second attack thanks to Sanctuary Guard himself, so suddenly both attacks are then 33k with a force 1 marker beneath it. And because the grade 1 gives us a counter charge, meaning we will always be able to pay for the counterblast of Sanctuary Guard Dragon to restand himself, making it so that these 3 units as an engine works without any disruption of your opponent as long as those units are onto the field, which is pretty decent for a standalone engine as Sanctuary Guard Dragon. Now my biggest problem right now with Sanctuary Guard is that it relies on a lot to go right, but that also means there is a lot of room to go wrong, because you need to have a back row filled with grade 1s specifically, and neither of those grade 1s are able to boost in any capacity. Meaning you also need to have access to grade 2s that can beat high enough on their own to actually make a sizable threat against your opponent. Otherwise, they could just only have to deal with 2 Vanguard swings, and both of those Vanguard swings can be perfect guards, as Sanctuary Guard doesn't have a guard restrict inherently. Now, that said, this engine can completely go off for a single turn 100%. If you have the cards in hand, you can do that. Your opponent have probably no ways to stop it, and it will happen. But the turns afterwards, then we get into this dicey situation, because your opponent, if they have access to control, and most competitive decks right now have access to control, they will target your grade 1s and they will remove it. And the moment they clear your board and you lost 3 grade 1s, it's a lot harder to reflood the board with grade 1s again to fulfill the condition of Sanctuary Guard Dragon, as you already lost a grade 1 in your right phase and you now lost 3 other grade 1s. That's already 4 grade 1s out of your deck without even thinking about it. You may be guarded with a grade 1 earlier in the game, or maybe that specific turn you need to guard with the grade 1. As a standalone engine, I'm kind of iffy about it because it doesn't really feel as a really strong package. Yes, 2 Vanguard swings are pretty prominent, but your rearguards are kind of questionable if you don't have access to the grade 2s, because you lose your boosters in the process. Now that said, I do think that Sanctuary Guard Dragon has a very strong potential as a side engine, because Sanctuary Guard Dragon works completely fine on just 12 cards. You need Sanctuary Guard as 4 copies, you need the grade 1 as 4 copies, and you need the grade 2 as 4 copies. Maybe you can lower the grade 2 to 3 copies, but basically that's the entire package that you need for Sanctuary Guard Dragon, and the rest doesn't really matter what you're going to run around it. You can make a core engine with a lot of grade 1s to increase the consistency of that condition, but you can even slot other very generic boss units together with Sanctuary Guard Dragon. Think of boss units that don't have a specific supporting grade 3 that they rely on. Gensalot is a very good example. You only need Gensalot as a grade 3 to make Gensalot work, and you have your Blaster Blades and the support cast around it. So you could fuse Sanctuary Guard Dragon together with Gensalot to have two very interesting dynamics working together. But another very good option, and probably the strongest contender here, is MLB. Majesty Lord Blaster can work perfectly with Sanctuary Guard Dragon because you can go into Majesty Lord Blaster as a first grade 3 turn, get those extra force markers, put everything under the Vanguard circle, so you're starting to stack all those force markers underneath your Vanguard, and then the following turn, you write into Sanctuary Guard Dragon, and then you create another force marker, maybe put it again on the Vanguard circle, maybe on the side column, and suddenly you have a Vanguard that's not 33, but maybe 63, 73k, that swings twice, and now your opponent is most definitely a grade 3, because even if you went first, you went into Majesty Lord Blaster, your opponent writes it to their grade 3, and now you're on Sanctuary Guard Dragon, and that means those two 73 or higher Vanguard swings will come with an extra critical. And then suddenly it's a lot more interesting, and then Sanctuary Guard Dragon sounds a lot more playable. So I think Sanctuary Guard Dragon as a standalone unit in the special set itself is fine. It's not bad, but it's not top tier like most decks right now that it will compete with Nitros per se or Dark Regulars, because they also have Protect markers, which just shits on this deck. But the moment that you can access to MLB, then suddenly it can win a lot of matches that don't have access to those Protect markers on a consistent basis, or just Perfect Guards in general, and it can actually just steamroll multiple decks. And there will probably be people out there that's gonna play Sanctuary Guard Dragon with a 16 crit variant, because Sanctuary Guard Dragon was one of the OG 16 crits builds that started to ruffle stomp on tournaments, so I definitely wouldn't be surprised if such lists will pop up here and there. So now that we've seen Sanctuary Guard Dragon in its full potential, before I want to close this video, I want to highlight two more Bermuda Triangle cards, which are pretty interesting for what they bring to the table. And one of those cards is a brand new grade 3 for Bermuda Triangle, which is Transparent Charm Seledy. And her abilities are act on Vanguard Circle once per turn, cost counterblast 1, choose one of your units, search a deck or drop zone for up to one card with the same card name as that unit, reveal it, put it into your hand, and if you search your deck, shuffle your deck. So this basically, for one counterblast, gets you a +1. And it's almost guaranteed because either it's in your deck or it's in your drop zone, and ideally you want to search at your deck, but once you already get all your copies from your deck, you can just recycle them from your drop zone turn after turn. This is fine depending on which type of deck you're playing. It's not really that good as a backup option because it's a Vanguard skill, meaning it doesn't really work in things like Pacifica or Coral or Riviera or that kind of stuff. But this thing works as its own engine, and it's probably going to be the budget deck that comes out of this set, and it has to do with her second effect and an interaction with a older grade 3 from the previous set. Because Seledy's second ability is Auto Vanguard Circle. When your rearguard attacks, reveal any number of cards with the same card name as the attacking unit from your hand, and that unit gets power plus 10k until the end of turn for each revealed card. So if you have a grade 2 on the field, you use Seledy's ability to get another copy of that grade 2 in your hand, can also be grade 1 or grade 3, and then the moment that that unit attacks, you just reveal that copy and that unit gets a free 10k power buff. But you can also reveal 2 or all 3 of the copies and then suddenly gets an extra 20 or 30k. And depending on what type of unit it is, if it has a strong on-attack skill or an on-hit skill, then that extra power suddenly matters. And funny enough, this is basically the opposite of the Highlander build for Bermuda Triangle, as you now want to play as many copies of the same card. And with that statement, there is one grade 3 that this card is probably perfectly made for. As in the last set, we've got a common grade 3, which is Trouble Verdal Pressive, and I already made a budget deck for last year's Bermuda Triangle set with that grade 3 as a main unit, but now with this new grade 3, that becomes a lot better. And the reason why I say that is because that particular grade 3 common card has the ability that you can run up to 16 copies of that grade 3. Meaning, you will have a lot of copies of that grade 3 in your hand. And then with the ability that this unit then gives that unit an extra 10k power once it swings for every copy you have. And also that grade 3 has the ability that once it attacked, you can reveal any copies of that unit in your hand. And it gets an additional 1k power. So basically, that grade 3 will gain an additional 11k power for every single other copy of that grade 3 the moment it attacks. So that grade 3 can easily get an additional 55k, 66, maybe 88k power, and it becomes a big beater. And because Seledy has a force marker, you're definitely going to play Force 2 and put the first Force 2 marker onto the Rigard Circle, making that Fasive a gigantic beater that swings with a double critical every single turn. And as soon as you have 16 copies in your deck, and you can even recurse them from a drop zone, your opponent cannot deal with them in the classic way of just removing them from the field. They need to remove it by dealing you 6 damage, because if you keep surviving every single turn, those things will keep swinging their way until they die. That is a really interesting interaction that we see with this grade 3, but there's another alternative, as yesterday they revealed another grade 2 that also interacts with this grade 3 to some degree. As that grade 2 is Cerulean Jewelery Fasive, and her abilities are auto Vanguard the Rigard Circle. When it attack hits a Vanguard, search your deck or drop zone for up to 1 Cerulean Jewelery Fasive, reveal it and put it into your hand, and if you search your deck, shuffle your deck. So this is a similar skill to the grade 3, only it's on hit and it's free, which allows you to do some early aggression if she is your Vanguard, or you just call her to the Rigard Circle to be a bit more aggressive on your turn 2 play. Now her second ability, which is really interesting in combination with the grade 3, is auto Rigard Circle once a turn. When it attacks, cost discard 2 Cerulean Jewelery Fasive from your hand, stand this unit, and draw 2 cards. So this is a restandable rearguard that requires you having multiple copies of itself and discard those, but you do draw new cards, which is interesting because that means that she can turn her other copies into maybe better cards. Now the timing of all these skills is that if you have those 2 extra copies in your hand, you can first resolve the grade 3 Vanguard ability to give this grade 2 the additional 20k power, so it becomes a 30k attack, before you discard them to restand her. And because the power increases until the end of turn, means that both attacks will have that increased amount of power, which can turn this in a really strong multi-attacker for that budget deck, go alongside that potential budget grade 3 that can be maybe over 100k power. So this could be a really interesting dynamic between the grade 3s that we've seen so far, and probably will give Bermuda Triangle to an actual playable functioning budget deck without relying on a budget archetype that we've seen in the previous sets, which makes sense as we already have a lot of archetypes within Bermuda Triangle, and to make room for all those decks, they probably want to do it more in a generic sense with cards like this. And with that, we've seen all the new cards revealed to us for today as well as this weekend, and as we've seen, we see a lot of interesting new cards. The Bermuda Triangle budget alternatives looking pretty spicy, and then of course Sanctuary Guard Dragon himself. Honestly, I'm not really super excited about him as a standalone unit, but once we look at the potential mishmash between other strategies within Royal Paladin like Genslop or probably MLB, then things are looking pretty damn spicy, and we might have a resurgence of Royal Paladin within the top tables with Sanctuary Guard Dragon, which probably will spark some PTSD of some G-era players, myself included. But with that said, let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of these new cards for Royal Paladin as well as Bermuda Triangle. Are you excited for these new reveals? Or can you not wait for the release of the DAIGO special set as well as Twinkle Melody once these sets are officially released in Japan and hopefully very soon in English? So let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. And as always guys, this video has been brought to you by our lovely patrons over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a patron today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I'll see you guys in the next one!